This is Secret Stories, and my name is Mary Cachapalya. Many people cannot be on camera because their employer, their family, their friends, their church or synagogue would roll their eyes, ridicule, misunderstand, or even fire them. Secret Stories allow you to tell your story with anonymity. Here I read experiencers' accounts emailed to us at Breaking the Silence. In this episode, we hear from DJ, who finds a change in perspective after his experiences. First, I want to say that I am a big fan of what you're doing. I have seen all of your work on Breaking the Silence and think what you are doing is so important. A non-judgmental place for experiencers to share their stories is a great way to help break down the stigma around the subject, and at least in my case, helped me feel less crazy and more accepting of my own situation. Which leads me into my own story. To start, I just want to say that most of my experiences are mild in comparison to others. I have never had hypnotic regression done, but suspect there would be a lot more to talk about if I did. Growing up, I had a fascination with aliens, abductions, but it fell to the wayside when I got older, only for me to come back to the subject in the past year or two. I am 30 years old now, male, of sound mind, and most of my recent experience took place in the northern New Jersey area, outside of cities and towns, in places with lots of forest and nature. I lived in a very isolated place in the woods a lot of my life, with the closest towns being 20 to 30 minutes away. I think the best way to lay it out is how it unfolded from my own perception, which doesn't really go in chronological order. It started when one morning I woke up feeling almost hungover and completely out of it. I did not drink the night before or anything that might have caused this. Within the first minute or two of waking, I became aware of a memory that felt like it had just happened, as opposed to remembering an old memory. It was fresh in my mind, but very short. I went to take a morning shower and tried to unfold the weird memory that was floating in my head. The memory started with me waking up on a metal table in a dimly lit room. I remember the light was almost hazy orange, but not bright, with pockets of darkness around the room. The table that I was on was kind of short for the average person, and the only way I could stay fully on it was being in a fetal position on my left side. I only looked around for about half a second before I closed my eyes in panic. I remember just thinking that I had to pretend to be asleep. I could feel movement around me, like 3 or 4 people were sort of hurrying and shuffling around the table. My eyes were still closed at this point. I just remember this sinking feeling of terror, unlike anything I had ever experienced. I started to cry, which made me even more scared because I worried that whoever was in the room with me would notice that I was awake. The room got still for a couple of moments, even though I could still feel their presence. Right as the panic was starting to peak, I could feel someone or something touch me on the center of my upper arm using 2 fingers. In the moment that touch took place, I was instantly washed over with intense feeling of love and comfort, and the last thought I had was that I loved her, which is by far the weirdest reaction I could have had, considering I never even saw who put their fingers on me, let alone any indication of gender. Then I completely passed out, with the memory of my waking in the morning connecting directly to the end of it, with no apparent gap in the time, as if my mind didn't exist between when the event happened and when I woke up the next morning. An almost eerie and uncomfortable break in the cohesion of my linear experience. I really struggled with this experience for about a year. I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't understand why it was so memory like, which is why I keep referring to it as a memory. It had no qualities of a dream and was a full sensory experience that you can only get from being fully awake. And the calming touch I received confused me significantly more to the point of depression. I know it sounds weird, but in this time I couldn't get the touch out of my mind. I had almost a longing for that touch again and deep feelings for someone or something I never even saw. Even to this day, I don't understand it. And while struggling to grasp and understand what had happened, I went into an almost paranoid state. I slept with the lights on for a couple of months, checked all the doors and window locks in the house before I went to bed, and some nights would be so scared to be going to bed that I would just start crying. I really thought it was all over for me. I had obviously gone insane, and it was just a matter of time before I would be put in a padded cell, because this could not be a real thing. It only got better when one day I was on Amazon looking for a book, and I saw Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. I was familiar with this book from my childhood. I remember when my mom read it, and it really freaked her out. And I just remember spending 20-minute stretches just staring at the eyes. So I decided to buy a copy of it to read. It was the first time the whole process of this that I started to not feel crazy and accept that something genuinely strange may have happened to me. During this period, about 8 or 9 months after the initial memory, I had many other strange occurrences, some of which still happen, but it seems to have calmed down a little bit. I had several occasions of rocketing awake in a cold sweat because someone had turned on all the lights in my room, but when I would sit up as fast as possible to see what was going on in my room, it would be pitch black, leaving me very confused. Twice I had an occurrence where in the middle of the night my whole house seemed to be vibrating. The first time this occurred, I thought it was my phone vibrating, but it wasn't. So I spent around a minute and a half crawling around the floor, putting my hands everywhere and on all the surfaces to try and pin down where the vibration was coming from. But it seemed to be coming from everywhere, like the house was vibrating like a tuning fork. Then it would just stop, and as quickly and as strangely as it started. I would have memories of people walking through my house in the middle of the night, thinking to myself things like, "It is way too late to have people over," or similar thoughts, and I would just fall back asleep. I have also seen 2 UFOs in my life. One, when I was driving through some back roads with my father as a child. It was a white glowing diamond floating about 150 feet above a dense forest area, and as we were looking at it, it just shot up into the sky. The second one I saw was about 6 or 7 months ago. After reading Whitley's work, I decided the best way to get over the fear would be to follow in his footsteps and go into the woods at night. I would walk about 2 miles into a deep forest behind my house and start meditating for 30 minutes at last light, so when I would open my eyes, it would be pitch black around me, and I would lay down and stare up at the stars. I became familiar with the satellites and aircraft paths in the sky over the area at this time, when one night I saw 2 low-flying lights. These were lower than even the smaller airplanes would get, and they were moving at a slow but steady rate from my right to my left. The one to the right of the front one was trailing perfectly behind it. I had a small flashlight with me at the time, and out of curiosity, I flashed at it 3 times in quick succession. The front one stopped completely and flashed 3 times, hung there for about 3 seconds, then shot forward back to the original distance it had been in front of the other light. They disappeared behind the tree line a few seconds later. I checked every resource, and there was no objects flying there at that time, satellites or planes, let alone a flying object that could stop at a drop of a dime, then rocket at breakneck speed forward. I know what I experienced is very mild in comparison to other experiencers, and I have other things that suggest this may have started in my childhood and other strange occurrences. But I'm really trying to minimize my wall of texts. I never planned on sharing these things with anyone, ever. But the work you are doing, I think, is vitally important in helping people cope and understand these things. So I guess my reasons are twofold. One of wanting to contribute to a group whose mission I believe in, and also, I guess, just tell someone about these things. I know my experience isn't very in depth in comparison to other people, and I do have more things I could write about, but I guess it still feels weird to talk about some of them. I know from what I wrote it sounds like a negative experience, but the transformation it brought about in my life is indescribable. I was a very unhealthy person with a very nihilistic outlook, and now, just short of 2 years later, my life has changed for the positive. I meditate every single day, and my perspective on myself and reality at large has completely shifted. Once I emerged from the initial fear, I came out an entirely different person for the better. Sorry for the mess of text. You can use this email in any capacity you see fit, or not, but I would really appreciate it if you maintain my anonymity. The people around me would be very judgmental about the whole thing, and I am way more terrified of being harassed by black helicopters and the military than I am of visitors. So I trust that I can rely on your discretion. Thanks for hearing me out and all the good work you guys are doing. Thank you, DJ, for sharing your story and epiphany. Secret stories are your accounts. Thank you for sharing them with us. It takes guts to share your account, and when you're ready, I will share your story for you. This is Mary Cachapaya. May love and light be with you.